I'm thrilled to introduce our most eminent panelist, and I'm honored to be sitting at this table with Oddrun Grønvik, who is the editor-in-chief of the Norwegian Nynorsk Dictionary, Ilan Kenneman from K Dictionaries from Israel, Simon Greg, oh my God, I can't believe it. I know Simon very well. Simon Greg from the Josef Stefan Institute in Ljubljana. Stella, another Marcantanotu? Yeah, very easy. From the Institute for Language and Speech Processing, and Piotr Żmigrodzki. Yes, well, but the Slavs, you know, from the Institute of Polish Language of the Polish Academy of Sciences. Now, we'll do kind of 2 rounds of questions with the panelists first. And our goal today in this panel is to look back towards ENeL and also look towards the future. And my hope is that we'll look back not only nostalgically, but also a little bit critically at what we plan to do and what we achieved. And then also when we look forward to the future, I hope we won't be only, you know, techno-fetishistic, but that we'll really be fully aware of the challenges that lie ahead. I will ask the panelists to present short position statements, and eventually we'll open the floor to discussion from everybody else. So in this first set, I would like to ask you to tell us a little bit about what you think are the most important takeaway messages from ENeL, whether for you personally or for the field as a whole. How much has the action helped us share, change, and increase knowledge about online and print dictionaries? And if you had to start all over again, would you wish that we had done something differently? You can choose to answer one or each of these questions. And maybe we can start with you, Oddrun.
Thank you, and thank you for my introduction. The most important takeaway message, I think, is the amount of agreement that has been reached on common standards for scholarly lexicography and its expression through the portal. Because it means that we have, to some extent, moved away from the old-fashioned definition of scholarly lexicography, which required explicit sourcing of everything, and recognized that it's possible to make scholarly dictionaries which are meant for the general public and not so exhaustively sourced, but still scholarly. Secondly, I think the cooperation in this action has brought about a heightened awareness of the cultural and political importance of lexicography and the need for respect amongst language communities, no matter whether they are big and powerful or small and in a minority position. So that is my first view of the takeaway messages. And the most important personal benefit as a whole, I think, is the support that this action has provided for the fact that scholarly lexicography and language documentation and empirical language studies have a place in a modern university context. And this is important because there has been a very strong trend for the past 30, 40 years saying that only the more theoretical aspects of language, like phonology, syntax, morphology, deserve academic consideration. Whereas my view has always been that if you can't link the theoretical aspect to an empirical basis, then you know, it could be so much hot air you never find out. So that's the and that has also been important in Norway because it has inspired the University of Bergen to take full responsibility for continuing the working on the language collections, which was not certain at the time when this affair started. I think I will hand on to the next man there because it's easy to use too much time.
Thank you. I would like to start with question 2. How much has the action helped us share, change, and increase knowledge about online and print dictionaries, etc., etc.? So I'd like to say that the invitation to take part in the COST action was a great surprise for me. My first reaction was curiosity and joy, because I am head editor of the Great Polish Dictionary. I was the director of Polish Linguistics Institute, which prepares dictionaries for Polish language starting from 1950s. So I considered the action as a good opportunity to increase our knowledge about technical aspects of lexicography, because in Poland the specific situation of Polish lexicography is that there is most linguist scientists working as lexicographers, not IT developers or editors, etc. It is because the Polish lexicography developed after the Second World War with slight contact with European and world lexicography. So after 4 years of the action, I can say that it was very good action for us, for our team, our group, for my institute, because it was I think it was opportunity to look at my dictionary, at our dictionaries and Polish dictionaries in European perspective, to confront our problems, our dictionaries, our lexicographical methods with European standards, to know people, know ideas, not only linguists, not only lexicographers, but also IT developers or editors. I think it was very, very, very important. And personally for me, it is an anecdote maybe, but thanks the action I first met my colleague from Poland, Robert Lew. We worked in Poland, but we have never met in Poland, and we met first at this action in Vienna. So it is also the advantage of the action. It enables people from the same country to meet outside the country and speak about lexicographical problems. As concerns first questions, I in my opinion, the most important achievement of this action will be the European Dictionary portal. Of course, it must be developed. New dictionaries must be entered to the collection, including Polish Polish dictionaries, it is very, very important. In Leiden in 2013, in January, on the first meeting, I said I thought it is impossible to make this portal like this, to put together this all the dictionaries, but it was possible. It appeared it was possible, and it is very, very, very successful in my opinion. I think the standards of retro-digitalization prepared in group 2, it is also a very important thing, in order to standardize retro-digitalized dictionaries of Europe, especially for us, because we in our institute we prepared many historical dictionaries which can be digitized, which will be digitized in the future. So we can draw on this achievements of the actions. Thank you.
Great, thank you. I can also echo what you said about meeting your Polish colleague. I think ENeL will go down in history also as helping bring peace to the Balkans, because Serbian and Croatian lexicographers met for the first time in this very action, and great love developed. So that was great. And yesterday, Serbian and Slovenian lexicographers watched the Eurobasket finals together, and Slovenia won. So congratulations. Okay, Stella.
Okay. Good afternoon. I am Stella Marcandonato. I am from ILSP in Athens. The takeaway messages and benefits. It was a great thing to see all the landscape, to have an experience of the landscape in general. And especially the computational part, although I'm supposed to come from this field anyway. But yeah, it was educational, the whole experience. And maybe it's going to be useful. And also, what was going on is going on in the various countries all over Europe. All this rich activity. That was very, very useful. In particular, it was useful for us, the exchanges and the seminars. Those were very useful because people came to Greece, and there was opportunity to work on state-of-the-art questions that, well, given the limited funds in the country, we wouldn't be able to touch, not even to think upon. Also the personal education, you know, young people from Greece went abroad. They were motivated because, of course, they were selected to go abroad and follow those seminars. So this motivation worked somehow. And those also were quite important things, and perhaps it would be nice if there was some way of carrying on in this way, especially with young people, in some way. And of course, networking, colleagues, and everything. You know, this is the bottom line, but yeah, it makes no sense to repeat it. Yeah, it's a commonplace. As regards my own experience, I was also a member in the PARSEM cost action, which had a large lexicon group, and of course computational processing, And there was quite an affinity between the two cost actions. As many of you remember, there was a workshop, a joint workshop in Skopje, organized in Skopje. And that, at least for me, it was really educational, because the development of lexical databases, well, for multi-word expressions in particular, was discussed in depth. And that was very good. One thinks that one knows things, but well, a good survey in depth is always useful. And some controversy as well, yeah. All these things, when people come together, we come from different backgrounds, we are all important in our places. When we come together, we have the opportunity to discuss with each other, and then this is quite revealing and helpful and these things. Anyway, so is that if we had to start all over again in this section? It is in this section. Yeah. Okay. I personally would enjoy a closer collaboration between work packages within ENeL. Yeah, a closer, somehow closer collaboration. And also, perhaps, initiatives. I mean, if there was a more, how can I say that, if people were asked more about initiatives. But anyway, there was a lot of work done anyway, so that's not more important. But a closer collaboration between among work packages. That's for me. Yeah.
Great, thanks. Simon?
Hi. Well, I will say my few words through personal experience. In my view, ENeL is, I mean, it was excellent experience through sharing of knowledge, of information. And I will just give you 3 examples what was I think a typical situation in lexicography. So I started working in 1993-4 in lexicography. And first thing I found out is that if you try to get proceedings from previous conferences, you can't get them. You can ask your library in Ljubljana. You can ask a library in Vienna. They don't have it. It just didn't exist. The only people they had that had proceedings from EuroLex congresses were people who were there. So we had to know somebody who didn't throw away the proceedings to get that kind of information. So one of the first things we did when we got to that stage, let's say, is digitization of previous proceedings of EuroLex congresses because the information was not available. That's one thing. Another experience I can say, when I started working in the field, I went to the Institute of Slovene Language. And I said, and I asked them if they can give me the style guide, because I needed to create one for the dictionary, if I can get the style guide for the Slovene monolingual dictionary. They said, "Go away, you rude person. You will not get it." And I could use an F word here. So the field was not willing to share that kind of information, I think. And the third example comes actually from ENeL. I don't know if you have this experience, but people who work, who create dictionaries, always use some kind of software called dictionary writing software. And when you talk to somebody using some kind of software, they said, well, we developed something in-house. It's not really, you can't use it, so better not to show it, you know, because you will not be able to use it anyway. So when we made this questionnaire about dictionary writing systems and corpus querying systems, it was really revealing, I think, because he could really see what is going on in the field in that area. And I think that everybody actually said that was really useful to get that kind of information from ENeL. And to finish here, so what I really hope will happen next in Alexis is that kind of sharing, that kind of bringing community together, so that everybody has access to, well, what can be shared, so that all the people can get knowledge and information from other people. I hope this is the main thing that will come out from ENeL experience.
Thank you. I think ENeL is a huge success. I'm extremely happy and proud to be part of it. At the same time, I'm very envious because I don't feel completely part of it, because I'm not European. You see also here, I'm not sitting at the table with the others, but kind of aside. I think the opportunity to have this meeting framework is wonderful. I think it's a very clever investment of the European Union for fairly a low investment financially. They managed for 4 years to keep a framework, professionalizing the lexicographical profession, and bringing people together. When we started meeting, I was a bit surprised. I didn't know there were so many more people in Europe dealing with lexicography. We started seeing lots of new faces from national language institutes, particularly from some universities. I'm talking about experience especially from EuroLex conferences, e-Lex conferences, and now we are nearly 300 people. I think it's fantastic, and I think there are still probably hundreds, maybe thousands of others dealing with lexicography. I think it's a lot of the things that were said here. I agree with this sharing thing, this networking, the possibility of discussing so many issues and aspects of lexicography, of modern lexicography, and I think taking it really forward. And that is very different from normal conferences of different associations in Europe or anywhere else. The ongoing work that has been going here, again, for just providing the finances for traveling and for meeting, that's all. But so much fantastic energy that has been developing from that. And of course, e-Lexis is a wonderful success of it. I nevertheless think that it's a pity that ENeL doesn't continue. I think it's a pity that all of these hundreds of people, not everyone can continue in a common framework. I would have thought of making ENeL shorter, with shorter term goals. I would have liked to see more interaction among the different working packages, and continuing ENeL besides the e-Lexis project, which has very specific objects, as Simon presented earlier today, to continue to have such a framework for everybody else, to continue meeting and continuing having this very fertile ground for discussing these ideas, for disagreeing about many things. I think that is a pity that we are not going to have this kind of forum in the future. Personally, I also feel there has been too much focus on dictionaries and not enough on lexicography. Please be reminded, this is the European network of e-Lexicography, not of e-dictionaries. There is the part of the digitization of dictionaries, which is, of course, essential here. Again and again, we are falling into this gap, but perhaps this is already another part of another topic for which I'm particularly close to.
Thank you. And if you've started touching upon this question, what next and what will happen in the future, and I would like to ask you all to make another very, very short statement, if you can, on what do you see as the most important challenges facing our field in the years to come. And then maybe Ilan and Simon can answer that question also in the context of Alexis. How do you think will Alexis face those challenges, or will the promise of ENeL really be developed by Alexis? But let's start again with this round.
Yes, well, there are two different things here. The one is the challenges facing this community of lexicographers and how that is going to develop. And I suppose I can agree with Kahneman in that it would have been fortunate if ENeL could continue. But I think the biggest challenge facing not only lexicography but digital humanities in Europe is the lack of political understanding for its long-term nature. Because what computerization has done to dictionaries is to demand institutionalization, where they have to be accessible 24/7 and they have to be updated. And there is no space for that sort of continuity in European cultural planning, as far as I can see. They have space for museums and libraries, but they don't have space for developing continuous resources. And so we end up with sort of 5 years here and 3 years there, and trying to hold things together in the gaps. And it's not fortunate. And unfortunately also the university sector is caught up in the same sort of short-term system. So that all the really big long-term projects in Europe, I mean CERN is the prize example, are placed well away from university budgets and funded under completely different systems. And we don't have anything of the same kind for instance, lexicography and language documentation. And I think that's a huge challenge which goes beyond the projects that are manageable in this forum, but I think they need to be addressed and raised. And the other thing I would like to put forward is, again, independent of e-Lexis, perhaps, though maybe it can be hitched onto it. I would like to see a standard for linguistic documentation of the different countries, the different languages of Europe. And what do we think should be in place before you can say that a language is properly documented? In terms of corpora, in terms of accessibility to resources, in terms of spoken language collections, in terms of full-form generators and systems for providing the morphology, in terms of different types of dictionaries to address different needs. It has struck me many times that people assume that only languages with many users need all these things, and of course we know that this is not true. Every language needs it. But it would be a very good policy statement if we could agree that this is how each language in Europe should be covered, if Europe wants to call itself a linguistically democratic union. Thank you.
I'd like to say about at last 3 problems. I think they are to be solved in the future. So first, the further integration of lexicographic resources. The second is the problem of distinguishing between so-called scientific or academic lexicography, and so-called crowd lexicography or internet lexicography. It is very important for users now because the user, if the user finds the dictionary entry in the internet, it is not, he is not interested which kind of dictionary is it. So this is the main problem, and the third problem, I think, it would be said more linguistic in lexicography. More linguistics in lexicography. Lexicographic activity, in my opinion, has two sides, at least two sides. A linguistic one and technical, electronical one. And I think the balance between these sides is good for lexicography. In Poland, for example, we paid more attention for years. We paid more attention for the linguistic side of lexicography than at the technical side. But on the other hand, in this action, the main topic of the action was, I think, the technical side of lexicography, lexicographic standards, technical problems, linking open data and so on. And I think it is very important to increase also the linguistic side of lexicography. I mean the producing of new lexicologic knowledge. Lexicologic knowledge to describe new phenomena of our language. Our language is not only to link the existing dictionaries, existing data.
Thank you. Stella.
Okay. I would be closer to the first share your views. Some kind of policy, perhaps, that could be pan-European policy. Once upon a time, there was a fashion in Europe. You know, there was a lot of money for language technology, whatever that was. And then there was a gap. And now technology requires resources. Language technology still requires resources, but there are not policies for developing those resources. Again, taking as an example of my country, where research follows the fashion, what happens in Europe, and is funded by the fashion, which is very, very important to think of. There is no chance to develop resources systematically if Europe doesn't develop resources systematically. Now, ENeL perhaps could be e-Lexis and whatever, or something that we can do after ENeL as an initiative. Could be a kind of advice and a kind of way of proposing some policies, because language technology doesn't exist without resources. There is no language technology without resources. But I'm not sure that this is quite clear. Anyway, I don't feel it back in Greece. Yeah, I don't know what you feel, but I don't feel it back in Greece. Yeah, I know it because I am suffering, but I don't feel it. Yeah. Okay, so that's my main proposal. I'll give you an example. This last survey that was done, how we think about what are our dreams about electronic dictionaries, where people were asked, you know, not us, but people in general, were asked to answer. Greeks were suddenly very enthusiastic. I didn't expect it. And they don't really have electronic dictionaries or lexica. They were dreaming, which means that they want them. Yeah? So, this is what I have to say. I mean, something that comes up as a request of the community, but an organized request, a structured request of the community.
Yeah, well, I won't be long, but just a few points. One important point, I think, is what is the important challenge facing our field is the same one all fields are facing. In the sense that you just have to take a look around yourself and see the reality. The reality is that we, in, I don't know, 20 years, 30 years, were kind of transferred from, let's say, paper-based culture into digital, internet-based culture. And it has huge consequences for everybody. I mean, not just linguists or lexicographers. If you take, and technology always does this. If you take, for instance, music industry, there was music industry also in the 19th century. Well, organizing concerts of classical music and so on, and they found out that they can record it in the 20th century, and then internet came along and the people found out they can download everything. So things change, and you can't stay with the same thing that you produced 30 years ago or 40 years ago now. And this is the, I hope, the point of e-Lexis, how to get lexicography from what was usual, let's say, in the 20th century into something that is usual and useful in the 21st century. That's one point. Connected or related to that is sharing, as I said before. Because in the 20th century, you could view your world as isolated because you had a book, like a dictionary of X language, and you had an institution dealing with X language, let's say Dutch. And so you could really stay in your world of the Dutch language. You can't do that anymore. That's a fact. And as soon as you produce something, it's a piece of information that it can be used for something that you can't even imagine. Your information has lexical nature. That's lexicography. So I would say that this point of view has to be changed, and it has been changed. We just have to find out the way how to, you know, present things, how to organize things, and produce things. And the last point I want to make is the following. So I'm kind of an amphibian between NLP world, because I also work on natural language processing resources for Slovene. And when you go to an institute like Jožef Stefan Institute with a lot of very clever computer science people working in artificial intelligence, when you say, where did you get that information, that resource? Oh, I Googled for, I don't know, hate speech, you know, and I Googled for Slovenian. What did you find? Well, there was a list maybe it's good. I just have this really wonderful application which uses that useless list. I mean, and every time you say, it's really, you know, not useful for Slovene, and they just don't care. So one thing is, you know, make a bridge between these two fields, and I hope that e-Lexis will do that.
I will try not to repeat, but add to what has been said, although things are connected. I think the first challenge is staying together against the current trends of division and separation. Also as regards language, it's giving more room to minority languages, also in Europe to non-European languages. You have non-European languages today with more speakers in Europe than some of the old European languages, and that must be recognized. And that is part of what we are doing in lexicography. It is connected to the technology connection. The connection between lexicography and NLP is vital. And I think that we should be looking more at that, not only at what NLP has to give to make better lexicography, but looking at the other direction as well. And all of that is connected, and that is bringing us to e-Lexis. And here again, I hope that e-Lexis will not cast away ENeL. Sort of e-Lexis, it's a huge consortium of 17 partners, but still, most of us are not going to be there. And I think there is a challenge for everyone who is not taking an active part in e-Lexis to remain actively involved, and for e-Lexis to be nourished by everyone else who is not part of it.
I absolutely agree, and in fact I was speaking to Stella earlier on about how other countries and institutions can get involved, and actually Simon mentioned that we will actively try with this officially called observer status to involve other people. Of course, we won't have the same kind of framework that we did in COST with the financial help, but maybe through our, what you called new short-term scientific missions, etc., we will be able to involve some people. And in any case, that is a very important message to take from this panel, that ENeL, not everybody is in e-Lexis, and that we need to find a way to move ahead. Thank you very much. I would like to open the floor to your questions or comments. I know it's very late, so it's really up to you now to decide if you would like to contribute. I hope you do. Any questions or comments? Or experiences with ENeL? Oh, thank you.
I can really relate to what you have been saying about project versus the community, which we cannot lose. But we can do something about it ourselves. I did mention at the end of my talk the Impact Center of Competence, and I did it for a reason, because we had a large European project with a lot of results, a lot of contacts, and we organized for it to turn into a center of competence, in which people for a reasonable amount can become member, which gives the center some financial room to organize activities. So we're sitting here together, everybody, saying, okay, we can't lose sight of one another. And there's the project and there's the networking activity. So maybe there is a possibility that we can come up with something creative, which allows at least maybe once a year for people to meet and have a workshop or whatever. I don't know. Let's not sit back and say, oh, it's a pity that there is not European funding. If we all think it's important and we have 230 or more people involved, there must be something we could do. I would think it would be very worthwhile doing. So that's my...
Thanks. Any other questions or comments?
More of the panel participants have mentioned the dictionary portal as an important outcome of the ENeL action. So one obvious and very practical question is, have you any guarantee that a dynamic project as a portal, which it is, with URLs changing, databases and software needing updating, is there resources that guarantees that the dictionary portal will be kept alive also when funding dries out after the 11th of October?
I can answer. I think, well, throughout the day, you heard what was happening in ENeL. So everything that went on in ENeL will be continued in Alexis, including dictionary portal. Everything.
Great.
Although, just to play the devil's advocate, it is hard to keep up these resources. I know it from different contexts, from Daria, etc. It's one thing to, you know, create a registry of things, and it's an entirely other thing to keep it going. Especially with the portal, I think the trick is, of, you know, we have language, what do we call them, curators. Right. But that's another volunteering activity. Nobody's getting paid to actually work on their languages. So again, we come back to it will depend to a large extent on this community and the effort it wants to put in. So I wouldn't say that it's an absolute given, but it is my hope that it will continue, because even Alexis is a 4-year project. It doesn't give us any guarantees for eternity.
Well, that's why I emphasize that you have to think about the future now. And I mean, it's really good that we have 4 years to do that. Because if you, I mean, you can't avoid thinking about other infrastructures and how they developed, like Clarin. There was a huge, well, not huge, but substantial funding in the so-called preparatory phase. There were observers there also. And at the end, well, basically EU said, now you have to finance yourself. What was done then is, are the countries in Europe interested in continuing with Clarin? Then you pay a fee. And this is how Clarin is now financed, basically. Also through other projects applied, but I mean, there has to be some core financing which, well, I think that it cannot come from other source than the countries. From the point where Alexis is finished.
Well, not to add anything redundant from what was said, but to rephrase it. From my Clarin experience, I know that there were two, let's say, very positive points that make the Clarin financing point strong. That is, on the one hand, it was the ERIC, that is a stable status in Europe. And the other hand was that Clarin has built a user community. And I think it was said from several persons, but it's in the structure and for the argumentation in front of the ministry or the European Union. I think people will ask in 4 years of now, how large is the community that is delivered by the infrastructure? So I think it has been said, but I just rephrase it in a more accentuated way, to say that you shouldn't forget the community and provide enough evidence in what way ever you choose.
Absolutely. I mean, an infrastructure without users is a contradiction in terms, is a hallucination. Many exist, yeah, yeah. No, but it's a very important point. Very important point, thank you. Anybody else? I can see these hungry looks in the eyes, but Ilan is not hungry. Yes?
I have a question to the audience. Do you agree with these things? And if so, what can be done alongside e-Lexis by those who are not there in order to continue nourishing that background, the framework, answering also Simon about we need to think about the future and what will be in another 4 years, etc. I think Catherine was saying before about Simon, about the possibility of having meetings once a year or things like that. I think it's in the hands also of all of you who enjoyed ENeL, who think that it's good, and who are not actively involved in e-Lexis, to actually continue the things and to interoperate together. And maybe that might be a possibility for the next stage, to already start thinking about after e-Lexis. So does any of you have some ideas?
That's a trick, you know, as a panelist to put the ball. Yes, no, you deal with the problem. I know. Advantageous position here. Right. Maybe people are just so hungry. Well, that is perfectly understandable. It's been a long and action-packed day. But yes, we have a volunteer.
Well, before I answer the question, just not to forget to thank the main organizer of our action, and because it was really a great job you've done. But concerning Ilan's question, what to do next, and maybe we should meet once in a year, but we do meet once in a year. At least we meet for e-Lex conferences, and we meet for OralX conferences, right? And maybe to continue with this working group activities, we can think, if we have enthusiastic people who are interested in it, inside of e-Lex and OralX, and we have GlobalX now, inside of those big conferences to organize a kind of workshops, maybe somehow to connect it with e-Lexis purposes and activities. And this is the way to go, because we do meet. And we come to conferences, so it's not so that those people, those organizations who are not within e-Lexis cannot really participate and disappear somewhere.
Absolutely, and also, you know, if you're in a country that's in Daria, we do have a working group on lexical resources that does very complementary things to what we've been talking about here. So there are other communities that you can become part of. So yeah. Okay, one more. And then we'll call it a day, I promise.
I would just say that from the NLP perspective, it would be good to do more pedagogy on the need of quality data, because it's very difficult to convince NLP people that good data beats a lot of data. Just that.
Thank you very much.